Hello and welcome to Diverse and Inclusive Leaders. This is a show where I speak with the most inspirational and thought-provoking leaders of today and unearth their unique stories of diversity and inclusion to help inspire, educate and motivate others to make the world a better place. We're actually recording this podcast on Valentine's Day, which is ideal because we have two brilliant leaders, Vivien Burnett, or Viv, as we know her, and Thomas Huscroft, both from HH Global and both with fantastic backgrounds, equally as positive about diversity, inclusion, belonging, equity, culture in all of its different guises. And as it's Valentine's Day, we're going to be talking about the power of connection, as well as exploring Viv's and Thomas's backgrounds and how they ended up collaborating so closely in both the global HR function and also the diversity, inclusion and engagement function. So without further ado, I'm going to hand to you, Viv, and then to you, Thomas, to tell us a little bit about how you came to be where you are today.
Okay, thanks very much, Layla. So a brief background on me. I was born in Catford, which is in southeast London, in the mid-60s. I was the youngest of three girls, and we lived there in an old Victorian house on the top two floors with my grandparents on the ground floor. I do actually still today reside in that same old Victorian house in Catford, and I've got to say it always has been and will continue to be one of the loves of my life, my home. Everyone has a variety of curveballs, difficulties, challenges that life throws at them. Our biggest shock came to us when my father died suddenly, with my mother widowed at 32 years of age, left with three children, me being the youngest. Out of this came the even closer relationship then with both immediate family and extended family, and something that has truly had a positive impact on my life and something that still exists today. I attended a very large London comprehensive school for girls where there was no real pathway for academic further education. So at the age of 15, when I left, I took a secretarial course at a local technical college. That, in actual fact, led to my first job in a typing pool. One of those offices that you now see in old black and white movie films, where there are just rows and rows of females sitting typing reports and letters using paper and carbon to produce the required number of copies. That first job took me in that business 5 years to work my way up to an executive PA to the managing director. One good thing about that is I can actually still type over 100 words a minute today, so pretty handy at times. The encouragement at home during that time came from the interest of my grandfather. Each evening as I arrived home, my first stop was to see my granddad in his sitting room, where he would ask me all about my day. As the time went on, this made me feel really proud of what I did in the day job. What a difference it made to me when there was someone so interested in what I did. I then did something that wasn't quite so common in those days. I decided to go travelling for a year. So early February in 1987, myself with 18 strangers took an old London Routemaster bus from London to Kathmandu, an organised trip over 18 weeks, but a trip of a lifetime, to soak up and learn such diversity as we travelled through a mound of countries, through Europe, Turkey, through Iran, through Syria, Pakistan, India, Southeast Asia, and then ending up in Australia to work for the rest of my year. Diversity, culture, this should be celebrated in every part of our world. I was so privileged to be able to do this and have the ability to learn so much, really, from so many people with so many backgrounds, lives, beliefs. Once back in the UK, I was ready to start a job. While still young, I'd learned so much and was hungry to draw on all of those learnings and experiences as I'd grown. My drive, experiences, continued encouragement from home well and truly set me on the next path. Over the next few years, I worked for a large business, where after a few years, I moved into HR. That was the start of my HR career. Seeing the opportunity in such a career to make a difference to people and the success of businesses through them, really. So attending college then for 2 nights a week, whilst my family looked after my 2 daughters, set me the path that I am on now, which is a fellow of the Chartered Institute of Personnel and Development. I'm now the SVP, Global Head of HR within HH Global, where we have colleagues in over 60 countries. A role where I can really influence best practice, change, grow, opportunities for all, and really encourage and look to make diversity and inclusion the norm. And I will continue to strive to do that in everything I do. But I'm now that's a bit about me, my background, my passions. I'm hoping that comes across as well. I get so enthusiastic about it. But back to you, Layla.
It comes across superbly, and it's fascinating listening to that journey, and that very modest journey as well, because you've gone on to work for global blue chip organisations, BNP Paribas, HH Global, which is seemingly taking over the world at the moment, through helping businesses do well by doing good. But you've mentioned throughout that little but also large nutshell, a whole raft of different things. The early allyship that your grandfather showed you, the importance of parenthood and caring responsibilities. Bereavement is a challenging piece. Have been through that recently with my father, and it does change you as a person, changes you as a leader. But you've shown there also incredible upward social mobility and a breadth of wanting to learn about a different smorgasbord of many cultures, and clearly brought that into the role as VP for HR across the different territories in which you work.
No, it's a good start to my life. Very lucky.
Thomas, coming to yourself, talk to us a little bit about your background and how you came to be where you are.
Okay, thank you, Layla. So my story is a little different to Viv's, but on the same themes. So I always say that I came from probably one of the best upbringings anybody could have. And a lot of people probably say that about where they came from and what they did. Before I was born, my parents had moved from Durham to Staffordshire. So they followed the coalfields, as people kind of did in the 50s and 60s. And my dad was a miner. And my mum at that time worked in a factory. She actually wired batteries for Austin cars way back when. I'm not sure what they are these days, but I think they probably went. One older sister, 4 years older than me, who remains as bossy then as she is now. And we were brought up on a pretty sprawling housing estate, which was actually owned by the National Coal Board at the time. And basically where the man of the house worked at the local mine, that's how you got the house. And all of the men of working age within our family worked in the mines. So my mum was one of 6 and my dad was one of 13. So we had a lot of houses on the same road and mostly next to each other. So we were all together. So similar to Viv, in some ways, you've got your community of family close by. Ours was brought together by work, and actually very straightforward working class families. On top of that, we were a very large and practicing Catholic family. And we attended church and services constantly. And I was actually an altar boy at our local church until the age of 18. And also has met the Pope, but that's another story, which was Pope John Paul II. The story carries on with mum and dad, who took on additional jobs at the time on top of all of that to save some money up. And they wanted to buy a house, and they wanted us to move away from the estate because it was getting a bit rough. A few years later, we moved, and mum and dad still had the multiple jobs to pay the mortgage because they just couldn't afford to do it without. But they always made sure that we were together as a family on a Sunday, as many as possible after church, whether that was lunch or it was a tea, because that was really important to everybody. And the picture of the story here sets up for everything else that was about ready to happen in life for me going forward. As an individual, very different to now, I was always very distant. I never really wanted to be involved with any of the kids that kind of lived around by us. And I started to read books. We weren't an academic family at all. Following a manual to fix the car, yeah, but not actually thinking about what you do for reading books. So I stuck out amongst everybody that I was around because I wasn't out playing football or climbing trees or anything like that. I was reading books. I also went to a Catholic school, which was really strict. And that was a public school, so it wasn't private. And I was actually bullied for three things. One is I was a bit fat. Secondly, I was a bit ginger. And I got quite crazy hair back then, believe it or not. But I was also called a puff all the time. And that's what I had from probably the age of 11 through to when I left at 16. I did really well to be able to stay away from people at school because I had no confidence around them. So I lived my school years in the library, very happy with that, by the way. I didn't kind of know anything else. And as a result, I did really well in exams. I went to college, took myself off, and I had a part-time job in a supermarket on the tills. Now, whether it was the job in the supermarket or the college or a bit of both, I actually found myself in terms of who I am today. And I came out as being a gay man, and I absolutely discovered boys at the time, I can tell you. So from there on in, I went to uni, which was unheard of in our family. Didn't get a grant because mum and dad had all these jobs and we were just over the threshold. So I funded my accommodation and my spending by having 3 part-time jobs myself because I'd learned that's the way that you got things done. I had one in a bingo. One in a nightclub after the bingo, and one in a bank when I wasn't at lectures. I didn't have the spare cash to go out all the time. So my downtime for me was studying, and I was, my best friend was the library again in terms of that one. But I did very well because I was the only person in our entire family who went to a top 4 uni and got a first-class degree. And it was pretty unheard of, but it was hard work to get there. But all of that I'd have never done without my parents and that network of family that I had around me. Without all of this, the story is the fact of the bullying, not feeling that you could be yourself in those environments. I actually turned down a few graduate jobs because I quite liked working at the bank, where I stayed for 7 years. Famous story in the early days, the branch manager at the time, and I won't name the bank, told me I was too gay to serve customers, wasn't allowed to do it. I didn't think anything of it. To me, it was just the way it is, and you are tolerant to it, and you carried on. And I actually moved into HR at the bank by accident, and it was called personnel back then, which Viv laughs about. We've talked about it a few times. And when I had the opportunity to move into different parts of HR and indeed move from the bank 7 years later, I did. I then chose to specialise outside of the standard HR things. And the reason that I did that is because I was all about improving yourself for what you wanted to do and to be the best version of what you can. And as the years have gone on, I focus very much on employee experience, but also diversity, equity, and inclusion as well. And the reason that I did that was I never wanted anybody to feel like I did at school or how I felt at work and being what was then blatant discrimination, but it was never recognised as such. And because I didn't want to do that, that's why I've worked over several years to lead diversity and inclusion work, which indeed I do at HH Global, as well as engagement and talent. So that's where I've come from in terms of the background and what brought me into the leader and the role that I truly believe in today, which has all been a personal experience.
Thomas, thank you so much for sharing. And it is, I mean, it's fascinating listening to both of your stories, because you are real models. We talk a lot about real models, sometimes even over role models at Dial, because you are people that have walked the walk and talk the talk, and also walk the walk, rather, my dyslexia there. But some of the parts that really resonate is that it seems very much so that you have broken through a number of the glass ceilings over the years, and the work that you now do is it's sending the lift back down to other future generations of leaders, which I think is hugely impactful. You both talked about what is brilliant examples of upward social mobility, but also how being different, and even though it didn't feel it at the time, that difference has really supercharged some of the tenacity and the resilience to help you get to where you are today. It resonates a huge amount with myself, and I also wasn't an altar boy, but I was an altar girl, and it and again spent much of my time in books and not feeling like I belonged. And this concept of belonging that you've both spoken about so articulately is something I don't think we speak about really enough, because it goes to the very heart of our being. I'm sure we can all remember those times, be it at school, be it in boardroom, where we've walked into a room and the hairs prickle on your arms, and you get that sense of, oh my goodness, I don't belong here. And it translates into the world of HR, people, engagement, diversity, inclusion, belonging, equity, culture, which means different things to different people, in the sense that the amount of time that people spend, I think it's about 30%, probably even more than that actually, it was a statistic I heard, is that's the amount of time that people spend worrying about how they fit in, or worrying about that. And if you think about how it would go into engagement, and then productivity and profitability, it's absolutely huge.
Yeah.
It's really interesting what you said there, Layla, about the fitting in piece, because I think, as you, in my story and with a lot of other people, it'll be you coped with what was there, and you managed to do it. And we've all got a different face that we can put on for different things, but some people it affects detrimentally by doing that. And I think we can see that more these days, where people are saying, it's causing mental health problems because of some of these things that happen. And people are, with the networks that are out there, people have more support to be able to come and get some help, and to voice these things. And I often think back to think, well, would that have made a difference to me back then? And absolutely would. But it's a weird one, because whilst it wasn't very nice at the time, I always think I wouldn't have really changed it any other way, because that's how you got to where you want to be. And one of the things that you mentioned is, we've kind of moved on and we've done this social mobility piece. Mine was never intended at all. It was just that I ended up being a bit clever for some reason. And I went through that route. It was then the life experiences and the people we met, Viv being one of them, that catalysts you into certain places of be, which is that power of connection, that people get together.
I agree with you there, Thomas, because there's so many things now that open up to give individuals a lot more confidence, so that it really is pushed with more and more networks there, that you're not on your own. And it's hard enough, there's hundreds, thousands of adults out there that still feel that way, but even without those life experiences, to be young and feeling that way, the more and more networks and the more we talk about it, it's giving people those opportunities to understand, no, you are not alone. There are others that you can talk to. You can talk to people. You're normal. It's not just you. You're part of the whole community, and come and talk. So to really have those interventions and those channels where people, can go to when they're feeling alone, makes so much difference.
It does. And, the role of business and the role of HR and leaders like ourselves and other leaders that are probably listening to this, we've come a long way in the profession to support that. And I always say that, you know, diversity, equity, inclusion, belonging, culture is not a HR thing, it's a business thing. And HR enable that to happen. But it took something somewhere in the early 90s for that to be enabled for HR to be able to do that. And it's a blessing that that's actually happened now, because that's brought us together on this call, but actually it's bringing people together to be the best versions of themselves they possibly can be at work.
It's fascinating that in both stories it's been champions, be it family, be it other senior executives, that's helped propel you forward and give you that confidence. On the one hand, as you'd said, Thomas, would you change it? You know, what had happened in the past? No, because it's allowed you to become the person that you are today. But equally, I feel very similar. You know, was there, other than my own wonderful parents who, you know, I was adopted, so both are white British, you know, didn't see anyone who was, you know, looked similar, sounded similar, any of those different things. And so you draw from the power of connection and senior executive sponsors that you look to. You know, for me, it was looking at other role models, real models in business that I had facets of resonance with, that I started to look to, started to almost shape and give me the confidence, which sounds like, you know, it has with both of you. And in turn, you then give that, you know, confidence, that executive support, that sponsorship, that allyship that transcends throughout the roots and the leaves of the organizations. Another piece to add is also, I think, the power of emotional intelligence and vulnerability, which is you know, for both of you, telling and sharing a story may not seem a big deal. You're both wonderfully modest with where you have got to, but equally the power that has for others who really care about whether they can get to those lofty positions of leadership, and hearing others have that element of vulnerability and humility about their journey, that it hasn't necessarily always been easy, that they have also felt that they didn't you know, fit in or belong. So I think that's the presumption, isn't it, that we presume those who are in senior positions, they just landed there. Actually, it's, you know, it's been hard work, it's been tenacity, and it's that, you know, the stories and the paths and connections that you traveled that have actually given you the, you know, the strength, the character and the skills to do what you do every day.
Yeah, great.
No, it's good.
Oh, I was going off on a ramble there. I was getting very excited about the conversation. So since it is Valentine's Day, and we're talking about the power of connection, and obviously this podcast will be released in the near future and not on Valentine's Day, let's talk about how you guys met, because it seems to me that you've found commonality in actually what is, you know, what is difference.
Yeah, you know, there's so many sayings, isn't there, whether opposites attract or stronger together, or, you know, that connectivity. But Thomas and I probably first met, I'm going back probably 20 plus years or so. Another reason to sort of, like, you know, give examples of our age here. We were both attending a development course run by SHL. And I remember going into the room and sitting on this desk and looking around, and this guy who was sitting next to me, who was Thomas. And I would honestly say probably within the first 2 hours, we had really kind of realised that power of connection. So whilst you know, you've heard here two various backgrounds that we had, there was still so much that we kind of had in common. And I think if I were to pull a few of those commonalities out, it was passion, our drive to succeed for ourselves, but also what became really apparent in both of us was our drive to see others succeed based on our backgrounds and what we'd, you know, learned through our experiences, whether it was at work or home life or family work. So, you know, to see people succeeding from whatever background they were. We were also both very passionate about future workforces, future talent. And, you know, it was really good as we started chatting. We were actually on that course for a full week. But we knew that connection was there for, you know, for hopefully ever and a day. But I would then say that resulted within 2 months of that first meeting was our first ever time that came about of working together for the same business, that we really worked well together. So, you know, using the word stronger together, I truly believe, hopefully without sounding arrogant and remaining humble, that the two of us as a team enabled a much more cohesive and substantial drive towards doing what we felt the business needed, and doing the best by everybody within the business that we worked in. You know, like-minded people, you know, whilst at the same time always challenging each other as to best practice and what to do next to deepen, you know, anything with engagement, diversity, inclusion, because that passion, we just fed off of each other like we still do today, really. And that's how it sort of came about, Thomas and I's relationship.
Yeah, and I think Viv puts that really well. I've got a different way of describing that story.
Oh, good heavens! Go on. Here we go.
So Viv did it really professionally. I do remember us sitting together next to each other, and Viv turned around to me and went, "I'm absolutely dreading this week because it's going to be really hard work, and we've got to." It was all about psychometrics and the days where you had to learn all of the norms and all the statistical stuff. And I went, "Oh God," I said, "but there's a free bar every night." She went, "Yeah, I know." And that free bar really helped that week, I have to say, in terms of what we did. And when Viv introduced me to the organisation that we both worked in first time round, it was full of very clever actuaries and people like that. And I remember going to meet a lady called Mary, who was helping Viv with a lot of the OD work there. And Mary turned around and said, "Do you know what? They're not like me and Viv in this business." I went, "I'm not sure about that." And they weren't. They were very different. But that difference was really important because we brought in a different personality and a different way of being around there. And we had a load of fun doing it, believe you me. So many stories, both good and probably wouldn't share on a podcast, in terms of the fun that was done and the coming together of people to do something good for a business. So and
that was quite rightly what you say there, Thomas. The difference that I think, again, without sounding arrogant, that we were able to bring to that business. It was a startup business that I'd been part of 2 years before meeting Thomas. And that was grown. We grew that business up to just over 600 people. And the amount of friendships and relationships through people working together that we witnessed through those years. And many of those are amongst some of my, you know, best friends now. And it was a passionate, really driven business to make it a successful business. But as part of that is because there was so much opportunity that we made available to so many people, that opportunity was grasped and really driven forward, as I say, to make the business successful as well. Through, you know, it wasn't just Thomas and I, it was everybody involved, but helping set that scene, helping that drive, helping that culture to move forward. Yeah.
And we worked across the way from a pub as well, so that was always handy.
I like how you both talk about culture. It's like it's living, it's breathing, it's sleeping, it's eating. It's often how we talk about diversity. It's you know, it is constantly evolving. And as I'm listening to you both talk, it's like this, you know, regardless of the differences and the differences of what set you apart, but equally, you know, you've really kind of helped, supported each other, driven that culture, because there are more commonalities than there are differences in some sense, and that is, how do we drive and engage people and utilize the power of HR, engagement, diversity as a commercial lever to drive greater business innovation and opportunity ultimately for future generations. And it always strikes me as a funny thing to say when people say, not yourself, when people say, diversity, what is, where's the the commercial benefit and things like this of it. And it's it makes me think of how you've explained this is we wouldn't explain why innovation or resilience and some of these critical pieces in your stories are anything else than a direct lever to business success and prosperity. Why would diversity be any different? Just an interesting reflection listening to you both.
Yeah, no, it's good.
So before we wrap, I've got a couple of lightning round questions, and equally, I'd love to know what, because diversity means different things to different people, doesn't it? And you both expressed that through the stories. For me, it's being Chinese, being adopted, being dyslexic. There's visible diversities and invisible diversities, different things to different people, all very much important. What does diversity mean to each of you personally?
For me, I think it's really actually appreciating, respecting, enjoying everybody's differences. And that's not just about success in the workplace. It's not just about success for the individual, but it's actually the celebration of differences. When you can really, I think it builds so much culture. There's still so much to learn. And, I still say a lot of that came from traveling so young as well, and really opening my eyes to that. So that's what I would say. It's a celebration of differences, to lots of ends and lots of way of enjoying life.
And I think what you say there, Vivi, is absolutely right. Building on that, I always think that the more diversity you've got in an organization, because diversity is what we have, it's around everywhere. And I always then think inclusion is kind of what we do to make that come alive and to give the opportunities to people. And the more we can do that, the more that people can be authentic and true. And when people are like that, they're the best version of anything they could ever be. And we've got a gift that helps us to be able to do that. And thankfully the world changed in 20-30 years, and the attitudes have changed, and organizations like Dial are helping to push that and to make some of those changes come through. And it'll be different in another 5-10 years time, but literally it is about bringing the best of people together. And the more diverse you are, the better ideas you've got, and the more fun it is.
Totally agree. You've got to have fun when you're working, because what is the point otherwise? It's the engagement that it creates, the community that it creates, and some of these brilliant superpowers that you both have in mobilizing talent and bringing that together across lots of different businesses as well. So another question, this is a little bit of a hard one actually. What's your secret to success, or is there one? Viv, I'm going to come to you first on this.
Okay, that's fine. I think for me, there's possibly two. There's two elements to success. I think an attitude towards everyone is equal, and everyone has a voice, and as a result of that, I can learn from all of those voices there. And I think my other part, my secret for success is, I've spoken a lot about it today, is support of my direct and extended friends and family, not just in my early career, but, as it stands today all around me.
Thanks,
I
Viv.
think for me is what I just mentioned. It's about the authenticity, and just be yourself. In all of the years, I've never tried to be anything else. I've just been me. And I kept true to that, actually, and it's not done me any harm, to be fair. The other thing I'd say about being successful, and Viv stole this saying off me years ago, is always try and do your best, but never let perfect get in the way of good. Otherwise, you won't get anything done.
I love that. And it's progress, not perfection, is essentially what you guys are saying. And also creating those safe spaces. Creating those safe spaces to be yourself, because you know, not all organizations are as embracive of different people and different cultures. And I think that's something clearly you're proudly talking about, the differences and the importance that that has, which also in itself, with you guys as being leaders, transcends a safe space for others to feel they in turn can be themselves and be proud of who they are when they come to work, which is really what we all want, isn't it? Is how can we come to work, feel that we belong, do a great job, and have a good time with our peers. Finally, if you were giving any advice to your younger self, this is a really interesting one, or could be someone that is starting out on their journey, listening in, thinking, oh my goodness, what is next for me? What would you say to younger you, or someone in a similar position?
I think challenge the norm sooner rather than later. You know, just push a little bit harder if you don't understand something, if you aren't quite sure about something. Easier said than done, because we all grow in confidence as we get older. So it's just push a little harder. No one's going to do it for you, but you know, there are support groups around you. A good few years ago now, I was a school governor, and the motto of the school was, if it has to be, it starts with me. And I think I love that motto, and it's really, yeah, I can make a difference. I can take this forward. I wish I'd known that a little bit more on my earlier years, but I've learned it now, so that's good. Never too late.
Clearly not stopped to. Love it. Thomas.
Excuse me. And I do think that hindsight's a wonderful thing, and we all know that. And I always go back and think, my favorite film in the world, to put it into context, is The Wizard of Oz. And I always think about the lion and the Wizard of Oz, who is always after the courage. And I think courage is a gift to people, and people have got different strengths within courage. If I'd have had the courage when I was younger to kind of stand up a little bit more, I probably would have been able to take on the early years a bit better than I actually did, to be fair. And of course, I always feel that it's made me stronger in the years after. So if anybody came to me saying, what should I do? How would you do it? Have the courage to do the best you can, because that's all you can do. Just have the courage to do it. You might not always get it right. You might get hurt in the process. That happens to everybody. But there are networks and there are support groups around that you can go to. And I do think that back in my younger days, they were there. I just didn't know.
Thomas, Viv, thank you so much. You've both been tremendous. And I am trying to think where I start when it comes to summarising this conversation. But I will say this, is that both of you have demonstrated the supreme power of connection, and the fact that, you know, life, being a little philosophical for a moment, is sometimes it's like a book, isn't it? You know, you go through different chapters, you meet people, and it's not, even until later on down that book, that you sometimes realize the profound impact that people have had on you, past or present, and leaders that you've looked up to who may not even have known actually that they've had that incredible impact, not only on confidence, but being able to, aspire to be the best versions of themselves and continually improve. And some of the things that you said as well around resilience and the blockers, as well as we've gone through the career, really resonate. And I think they will do with many people that are listening in. Been listening and reading a lot around stoicism of late, and makes me think of one of my favorite authors, Ryan Holiday, who talks about the obstacle being the way, and actually how you come through and navigated these changes, in your personal lives, often being maybe the first, the second, even the third, is actually paving that way for others, and future generations of leaders to be able to thrive and to be able to flourish. And equally, through that power of difference, that fun, that connectivity, you've really used your superpowers in HR and engagement and diversity to transcend driving further engagement throughout the organisations that you've worked with. And finally, I really liked some of the pieces that you talked about when it comes to progress over perfection. You've talked about this being an evolution and the journey being an evolution, but equally HR, people, leadership, diversity, inclusion, belonging, equity, culture, it is living, it's breathing, it's sleeping. And so ensuring that we stay abreast of the curve and we really utilise that as not only a commercial lever for economic growth and prosperity, but we equally utilise that to continue forging connections and driving engagement within our organisation. Viv, Thomas, thank you so much, and also happy Valentine's Day to you both. It's been tremendous.
I'm still waiting for my card, Thomas.
It's in the post.
So what about mine, Thomas?
It's in the post.
You sent me one.
Where's mine?
It's in the post. It literally is post.
Oh, dear.
My name is Layla Mackenzie-Dars, founder and CEO of DAR Global. You've been listening to the Diverse and Inclusive Leaders podcast show with the fantastic Viv Burnett, FC IPD Global HR Director for HH Global, and Thomas Huscroft, Senior Employee Experience Leader and Diversity and Inclusion Advocate. Please do make sure you listen, subscribe, pass the podcast on to anyone that you feel would be positively impacted by some of the words of our brilliant leaders today. You can find us on Apple, Spotify, or you can visit us on your favourite podcast app or directly at darglobal.org/podcast. Look forward to seeing you again very soon.